Hi guys, it's Michelle, and today's video is going to be all about the tragic life of Elvis Presley. This is a video that I've wanted to do for a long time. The Elvis movie, even though it came out like 6 months ago, I just got around to seeing it, and it was super interesting, super eye-opening. I thought Austin Butler did a great job. Elvis is someone I've always found very interesting. My grandma is literally obsessed with Elvis. She always has been. She also believes that she is a psychic because she was wearing an Elvis Presley sweater the day that he died. Don't really know how that qualifies as her being a psychic, but I love her enthusiasm. I've always been interested in the story of Elvis. A lot of you guys really wanted me to cover, you know, his life and his death and everything that happened to him. So without further ado, let's get into it. Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8th of 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi to Vernon Elvis Presley and Gladys Love Presley. Elvis actually had a twin brother named Jesse Garon Presley, but he was a stillborn. Elvis and his parents actually grew up super poor. They lived in a little house in Tupelo, and Elvis and his parents even had to share a bed growing up because of the lack of money that they had. Elvis was always interested in music from a young age, but no one ever really took it seriously until he was in first grade and he was singing Old Shep during his morning prayers, and his teacher really started to notice and think that Elvis was an incredible singer. And this was a teacher who regarded him as incredibly average in general. Elvis entered a singing contest on October 3rd of 1945, and this was his first ever live public performance. Elvis ended up receiving a guitar that year for his birthday and got guitar lessons, and the rest was history. Elvis struggled growing up in school. He was bullied a lot. A lot of kids called him a hillbilly, did not like going to school. He was kind of teased as a kid growing up, and his family moved a lot as well, eventually settling in Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis was 19 years old. He walked into a Memphis recording studio and paid $4 to have a few songs recorded for his mother as a present. Sam Phillips, who was the owner of the studio, loved Elvis's rough, soulful sounding voice. He actually invited him to come back and sing with some local musicians. After Sam Phillips heard Elvis sing That's All Right, he was absolutely stunned and was obsessed with his voice and agreed to have him record that as his first single and sign him to Sun Records. The recording went to the top of the local charts, and it changed Elvis's life forever. Elvis began to grow a pretty decent following in the South. He ended up recording lots of songs and even performing little small performances throughout the South. A man named Oscar Davis saw Elvis perform in October of 1954, and he even met Elvis backstage with Elvis's manager at the time, Bob Neal. Oscar Davis was an associate of Colonel Tom Parker, who was a man who at first was doing carnival stuff, like he was a carnival promoter, but then later on switched into music and was one of the best music promoters in the area. Bob Neal knew that Colonel Parker could bring Elvis's music and career to the top. Oscar Davis raved to his associates, Colonel Tom Parker and Tom Diskin, about Elvis, saying that he was so incredible and they needed to see him live. Colonel Tom Parker and Tom Diskin decided to check out Elvis's performance at the Louisiana Hayride on January 15th of 1955. But Colonel Tom Parker did not meet Elvis at this specific show. It was actually a month later where him and Elvis had their very fateful meeting. February 6th of 1955 was a day that changed Elvis's life forever. He was playing 2 shows at the Ellis Auditorium in Memphis, Tennessee, and in between the 2 shows, he stopped in to have a meeting with Colonel Tom Parker, Bob Neal, Tom Diskin, Oscar Davis, and Sun Records' Sam Phillips, all at the Palumbo's Cafe. The meeting didn't go particularly well because Colonel Tom Parker was very adamant, explaining that he could bring Elvis to whole new levels and he can have so many different connections that a small record company like Sun Records could never do. Naturally, Sam Phillips, who was the owner of Sun Records and essentially founded Elvis, did not like what he was hearing, even though he knew it was true at the end of the day. Ultimately, the team made a decision to trust Colonel Tom Parker, and for the first year of working with Colonel Tom, it was Colonel Tom Parker and Bob Neal working together as Elvis's manager and promoter. Just over a year later, on March 15th of 1956, Colonel Tom Parker ended up becoming Elvis's sole manager and also scored him a very incredible record deal with the Radio Corporation of America, and the RCA ended up signing Elvis for $40,000. This record with RCA was Heartbreak Hotel, and obviously this was a huge hit and made him a national sensation in early 1956. September of 1956, he was on the Ed Sullivan Show. All of the teens went into hysterics over Elvis. They all loved him, but not everyone was a huge fan. Because the 50s and 60s were considered to be more conservative times, a lot of people had issues with Elvis's hip gyrations and just sexual dance moves essentially overall. And even though his fans were incredibly happy with Elvis's performances, and Elvis himself even said like he didn't mean anything like sexual, you know, by his dances. He was just kind of feeling the music. His provocative dance styles ended up leading a lot of his shows to be recorded from the waist up. Elvis didn't really take any of this seriously until a Florida judge claimed that he was gonna have Elvis arrested for his dance moves, which is just so wild to me. Made him kind of chill out for a sec. He was more focused on movies at that point in time, and in November of 1956 his first movie, Love Me Tender, premiered. Due to the backlash from the media about his dance moves, Colonel Tom Parker kind of had Elvis more focused on acting. It wasn't because Colonel Tom Parker tried to get him to stop dancing this way. He actually loved Elvis's performances, so that's kind of like a false reality that was portrayed in the movie. It was more so the media itself wasn't liking Elvis's moves. Obviously the fans loved it, but nonetheless it kind of geared Elvis in a direction that really, you know, made him focus on movies and just recording albums rather than touring. By spring of 1957, when Elvis was only 22 years old, he bought Graceland for $100,000. Although Elvis's career was booming at the time, the media would not stop their judgments about Elvis's dancing. Plus, the fans did not like it when Elvis tried to kind of censor himself and just stand there. Like, he just wasn't performing the same way. Like, it was very much hindering his performance, and the fans complained, saying that they missed the old Elvis. It just wasn't working out overall for him. So Colonel Tom Parker came up with the idea to have Elvis go to the army. It's a little bit dicey as to why have Elvis go to the army. A few people have said it's because he wanted to have Elvis prove that he's like a good American boy and is going to help serve his country. Colonel Tom Parker makes it seem more like he wanted to expand and extend Elvis's career, and he knew that if he burnt him out at 22 years old that he wouldn't have longevity. I don't know what the truth is. Elvis was drafted into the army in March of 1958. Elvis grew up with a super close relationship to his parents, especially his mother, Gladys. People actually found this relationship a little bit strange in certain ways. Him and his mother would kind of call each other pet names and talk in baby talk, which is interesting, obviously. During Elvis's rising career, his relationship with his mom became very complicated. Gladys became very depressed and lonely, and she ended up neglecting her health a lot. She put on a lot of weight and began to drink every day. Although she really wanted Elvis's career to succeed because it's her son and she loves him, she also didn't want it to take away time with him from her, which it was doing. Also, the hysteria of the crowds and the fans very much terrified Gladys, and she was worried about Elvis's life. Doctors ended up diagnosing Gladys with liver disease. As she got worse, she was admitted to the hospital in August of 1958. Elvis was in Fort Hood, Texas at the time to fulfill his military obligations, like we already said, but he actually got emergency leave to see her. Sadly, Gladys passed away just a few days after Elvis arrived, and he was absolutely devastated. He was reported to have been grieving almost constantly for days. Elvis, like I said, had a very close relationship with his mom, and we see how that affected him later in his life. Not having a close relationship, but it seemed like she had like kind of like a mama bear persona with him. She very much did not let him, you know, go out to the creek with the other kids. The kids teased him because of his relationship with his mom. He was just a mama's boy, and he was teased a lot because of it, and it even affected his dating life in high school. He never really dated anyone because he felt really uncomfortable and didn't have any game, essentially, because he just didn't know how to react to women other than his mom, and it just created kind of a weird boundary issue with Elvis. But as he got more famous, Colonel Tom Parker suggested that Elvis start dating some of his co-stars from movies to get the press talking, and basically just date some beautiful women to, you know, just have the media sparking and talking about them. So from time to time, Elvis was seen with several different co-stars and speculated to be dating, but nothing was ever that serious until he was stationed in Germany when he returned to the army after his mother's death. So Elvis met Priscilla, which obviously went on to be his wife, in 1959. Priscilla was only 14 years old at the time, and Elvis was 24, so obviously, it's a red flag. A lot of people and a lot of psychologists have even studied this and studied why Elvis was attracted to young women. And it seemed like the general consensus has to do with the relationship that Elvis had with his mom. Even though 1960s was definitely a different time and a lot of things slid that definitely shouldn't have, people definitely still had issues with Elvis's relationship with Priscilla, especially way later, like after Elvis died, because Priscilla had said multiple times that Elvis really wanted a wife who he could curate to be the perfect wife for him. And to do that, he needed a young woman, a kid who literally didn't know any better, which is obviously not good.
You were 14 years old. Elvis was 24, right? Mm-hmm. How did your parents allow a 14-year-old teenager baby to be with this then superstar of...
It was not easy on my parents. I was rebellious somewhat.
What do you think attracted a 24-year-old star to a 14-year-old inexperienced? Or am I telling you just as I say that? Is that what attracted him to you?
The inexperience, yes. I think Elvis had been around Hollywood already. He had already seen Hollywood quote-unquote starlets. So I think in his own mind, he thought, well, I'll just be with someone and teach her as it comes. And I don't think a lot of older women would have put up with a lot of the things that went on. I mean, you know, because when you're young, you kind of... I listened to him and did what he said.
Priscilla's parents definitely were not cool with Elvis and Priscilla dating at the time. They were very confused what Elvis Presley, the singer, the king, wanted to do with their 14-year-old child. They just were not understanding. They didn't get it. Rightfully so. In 1963, Elvis managed to talk Priscilla's family into letting her live with Elvis's father Vernon and stepmother Dee Presley at a home kind of like across from Graceland. But that arrangement only lasted a matter of weeks because Priscilla was just back and forth from the house and Graceland. Elvis and Priscilla Presley were married on May 1st of 1967. They got married in Las Vegas, Nevada, and 9 months later, on February 1st of 1968, they gave birth to their daughter, the late Lisa Marie Presley. Very, very tragic that she passed away. Everything that Lisa Marie Presley has gone through is just so terrible, and Priscilla, like, it's honestly horrible. Nonetheless, Priscilla claims that Elvis became very fascinated with the occult and metaphysical phenomenon and became very addicted to prescription drugs. Priscilla claims that when Elvis started doing a lot of drugs, that this was when she noticed obviously a shift in his personality. He went from being a very sweet and playful guy to being super passive and introverted, and it was just so not the Elvis that she knew, and she didn't know what to do at that point. It's speculated that Elvis refused to have sex with Priscilla after she gave birth to Lisa Marie because apparently Elvis said that he would never want to sleep with a woman who had a baby, but Priscilla said this is not true, so I'm not really sure where that exactly lies. However, both of them did have affairs throughout the end of their marriage, according to Priscilla. In 1972, Priscilla decided that she wanted to separate from Elvis and get a divorce. She had tried hard, and she said that it was never because she didn't love Elvis. She really loved Elvis. She still claims to this day Elvis was the love of her life, but it was more so because Elvis had turned into someone that she could not recognize. He was heavily addicted to prescription medication, and it was completely affecting his personality. So the two separated and got divorced in October of 1973. After Elvis and Priscilla's divorce, Elvis went on to date several different women. He seemed to be getting into a very dark spiral of drugs, dating, and other self-destructive habits. Elvis had many male friends at the time. They were dubbed as the Memphis Mafia. I guess they would just get into some bad shit. They would hang around, go to crazy parties. Elvis got to the point where he was doing drugs daily to stay awake, like taking uppers, and then drinking, staying up all night, and using downers to go to sleep at night. Personal physician Dr. Nick kept prescribing Elvis a cocktail of amphetamines and opiates to get him through the late 60s and early 70s. According to Dr. Nick, Elvis's problem was that he didn't see the wrong in what he was doing. Dr. Nick claimed that Elvis felt since he was getting these drugs from a doctor, he wasn't really doing drugs. He wasn't really an addict, because he had access to these prescription drugs, but really that was only out of the privilege of him being a celebrity. But at the end of the day, he was addicted to drugs regardless if he was getting them off the street or if he was getting them prescribed to him. So from July 31st of 1969 onward for 7 years, Elvis was doing a residency show in Las Vegas. Obviously, this was super famous. This was at the International Las Vegas Resort and Casino. And all of this was at the hands of Colonel Tom Parker. Elvis did not really want to do this, maybe at first, but towards the end of his life and the end of this show, he was so exhausted and he honestly wanted to tour the world, but Colonel Tom Parker would not let that happen because he signed a crazy deal with this residency because Tom Parker was broke. Oh, Elvis had to perform 2 times a night every night for years. And Colonel Tom Parker was pocketing 50% of the profits, which is so crazy because I'm like, as someone who's had managers and, you know, done things obviously on such a lower scale, just saying, but like in general, I know a lot of people who have managers and not one of them takes more than 10%. So that is insane that he was getting 50% of Elvis's hard work of performing twice a night, every night in fucking Vegas. Like, it's just crazy to me. But he was doing this because he was bankrupt, because he had a gambling obsession. Colonel Tom Parker was a notorious gambler. He spent upwards of $1 million a night on gambling. Like, lost $1 million a night, which is fucking crazy because it was 1960 and $1 million was worth a lot more than it is now. That's so, I like can't even fathom how you do that. Like, how the fuck did you spend over $1 million? That's, I literally don't even know how someone does that. That's like insane. I like spending money, but not on gambling. I don't know, I've never gotten into it. I did it in Vegas once and I was like, ugh, it's boring. Elvis also became obsessed with guns. He began to collect them and he met President Richard Nixon and told him that he wanted to protect the country from the influence of hippies and fight against illegal drugs, which was obviously very contradicting considering he was absolutely addicted to these drugs. They're legal because they're prescription medication, but what you're having your doctors prescribe you is illegal. You should not be prescribed all of those meds. Anyway, we'll get into that. In 1976, Elvis gained an excessive amount of weight. He was struggling with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and all of this was caused by drug abuse. Performances also became incredibly disastrous at the time. His guitarist went on to say, quote, "He was all gut. It was obvious he was drugged. It was obvious there was something terribly wrong with his body. The words to the songs were barely intelligible. I remember crying. He could barely get through the introductions." About 4 months before Elvis died, he was on tour in Louisville, Kentucky, and the night before Elvis's show, he felt incredibly sick. He had a fever. He was just down bad with the flu. And that morning of his performance, Dr. Nick came, who was his personal doctor, prescribing him all the drugs, came in to the hotel room. Elvis's hairstylist, Larry Geller, was there the whole time, and he was freaking out when he was like, this is so fucked up. Like, Elvis is clearly needs help. Like, he is on drugs, he is addicted, and he is not well. Larry Geller heard a knock at the door. He answered it, and it was Colonel Tom Parker, who never really went with Elvis on tour besides at his Vegas residency. So he was pretty shocked to see the Colonel, but he was excited because he was like, yes, finally, Colonel Parker is going to see the way Elvis is right now and how he needs help. Like, he needs a lifeline, and Colonel Tom Parker is going to give it to him. Like, this is perfect. But sadly, that never happened. Instead, what happened was Dr. Nick was taking a bowl of ice water and dumping Elvis's face in the ice water and just trying to get him to, you know, be revived, because the hairdresser Larry Geller says that he was basically comatose at this point. Colonel Tom Parker walked out of the room and said to Larry,
Colonel Parker walks up to me and and I get up, we stand toe to toe, and he stares coldly into my eyes. He says, "Now you listen to me. The only thing that's important is that that man is on stage tonight. Nothing else matters. Nothing." Which
is obviously really fucked up and also really sad. So yes, that moment in Elvis was a real moment that did happen, which shocked me because I knew a lot of this stuff was a little bit like fabricated or different than, you know, it had actually went down. it shocked me that that was real, because like, how could you see someone basically dying, not helping them? Like, it's sick. It really is. Because Elvis's last performance, he was just so not in good shape and not in a good headspace. It was very, very clear that there was something seriously wrong. Kind of reminds me of Amy Winehouse a little bit, and her last performance, how it was very clear that there was something wrong and no one was doing anything about it, and still no one did anything about it. So it's very sad. It made Larry, Elvis's hairdresser, lose hope that Elvis would ever be saved. Fortunately, that came true on August 16th of 1977 when Elvis passed away at the age of 42 years old. His girlfriend at the time, Ginger Alden, was the one who found Elvis unresponsive on his bathroom floor in Graceland. He was in sort of a position where he looked like he was sitting on the toilet. His pajamas were like at his ankles, but he was on the floor, not actually on the toilet, which is like common misconception. But it looked like he had fallen off of the toilet. A lot of people assumed that he had a heart attack from straining himself from trying to go to the bathroom, because he had not had a bowel movement in over 4 months before his death, which is obviously really crazy. And due to the drug abuse that he was, you know, having in the IBS and everything. After a 2-hour examination of the body, Dr. Jerry Francisco, the Shelby County coroner, claimed that Elvis Presley died of a cardiac arrhythmia, and also claimed that Elvis's death had nothing to do with drugs, which is absolutely unheard of that they would say this after a 2-hour essentially like examination. You need a toxicology report to decide if there were drugs in someone's system. You would never be able to know that right away. That takes weeks to months to get the toxicology report. It was really weird to Elvis's family, but also like the media in general, that they were kind of covering up the fact that Elvis was a drug addict. And this was like a huge thing that they were kind of trying to hide, that even confused the family. Like, they heard when we did that it was a cardiac arrhythmia, which ended up kind of being true, but it was also proven in the toxicology report months later that he did have several drugs in his system. So this created so many different investigations with Dr. Nick, obviously, who claimed that he didn't think that Elvis had a drug problem. And he also said that Elvis abused drugs accidentally, which literally, what do you mean by that? In the last 7 months before Elvis's death, Dr. Nick prescribed Elvis more than 5,000 pills.
Prescribed to Elvis Presley, and the prescriptions are all signed by you. Over 5,000 scheduled to narcotics and or amphetamines. That comes out to something like 25 per day.
I don't believe that.
Which is ridiculous. But what got me is I was watching this interview, you know, when researching for this video, and I noticed that the pharmacist was like interviewed, and the same pharmacist filled all of the scripts for Elvis's drugs that he was being prescribed by Dr. Nick, which is so insane.
More than 5,300 pills in just 7 months. More than 600 pills on the day before Elvis died.
Yes, possibly in my own mind I would question this thing, but I never questioned the doctor.
In light of what happened to Elvis Presley, do you have any regrets?
I fill prescriptions. I did not give the drugs to the patient. I gave the prescriptions to the doctor. No, I don't have any regrets.
You were just following orders.
I was following orders.
My sister's a doctor, and one of my best friends is a pharmacist. And as a pharmacist, those are things that would be flagged, like 1000%. If you notice that a specific patient was getting several different, you know, prescription drugs, it's flagged, regardless of what the doctor writes, no matter what. In a pharmacy, you have to always be on the alert of what the doctor's prescribing, because doctors sometimes write prescriptions wrong and, you know, different things. And at the end of the day, that kind of goes on the pharmacist to know what they're doing and to make sure that the drugs make sense in a way. So basically, there's no way that this wouldn't have been red flagged at the pharmacy. There's no way that he would have just like ignored it. He definitely also knew what he was doing. I just want to say that due to Colonel Tom Parker's bankruptcy and in general scumminess, the way I just got scared, I'm like, what if he haunts me tonight? Because Colonel Parker is dead. So don't do that. Anyway, Colonel Tom Parker obviously had to find doctors and pharmacists who were corrupt enough. Yes, you can say because Elvis was famous and he was just like, hey, just do it. And they were just like starstruck or whatever, but I doubt that that's the case. I think Colonel Tom Parker ended up paying people off with his 50%, with whatever left he could, basically, because he had to keep Elvis going. And that was what his life was dedicated to, keeping Elvis on that stage and keeping him making money. Because at the end of the day, if Elvis didn't make money, Colonel Tom Parker would be in serious shit, because he obviously owed a lot of people money. He owed the government a lot of money. He also would have been kicked out of America. There are so many different issues with Colonel Tom Parker that drive me insane, because it's just like so frustrating to watch someone like completely just take someone and consider them like a cash cow. That's exactly what he did with Elvis. He saw the opportunity, found people who were able to sustain Elvis's life. Once Elvis got into drugs, and sustained him to, you know, get him on uppers so that he would perform well, and downers so that he could sleep at night, eventually leading him to be addicted to prescription drugs. Obviously, these doctors and pharmacists had to be corrupt to be prescribing someone this, which is scary in general, because this still happens to date. And it probably will never stop happening, but Colonel Tom Parker needed Elvis to stay on stage. That's what he did, but that's ultimately probably what killed Elvis. So I think the aftermath of Elvis's death is so interesting, because Elvis was not really in debt. Well, kind of. He really had a lot of stuff to pay when he died, and, you know, maintaining Graceland, almost $500,000 a year. And obviously, since he wasn't alive anymore, he wasn't making money touring or anything like that. So Graceland was left to Lisa Marie Presley. She is his only daughter, and she became the sole heir of Graceland. But they kind of made it a rule that until 1993, Priscilla would be in charge of it, because that's when Lisa Marie would turn 25 years old. Priscilla was in charge of Graceland and making Elvis's name last, because at the end of the day, that's really what Elvis wanted, was to be remembered. And apparently Priscilla claims that this was super important to Elvis, and that he felt like no one was gonna ever remember him, and that he was never gonna make it, which is just obviously crazy, because he ended up being like literally one of the most famous people in the world. At the end of the day, Priscilla Presley is a remarkable woman. I think she is so cool, and I feel so bad for everything that she's been through. Losing obviously Elvis, and then her grandson, and then Lisa Marie is just so terrible that she had to go through all of those losses in her life. But she did single-handedly turn Elvis Presley Enterprises into an empire. Really teetering back and forth, because she wanted to be able to make Elvis have, you know, a name that lasted, but also make a lot of money for, you know, her child's future and her future grandchildren's future. Once she got the deal, she was be in charge until 1993. She was very nervous that there was going to be nothing left at that point for Lisa Marie. Luckily, she was able to completely turn it around. She really didn't want to open up Graceland to the public. At first, she was very much uncomfortable with the idea, but in 1982, she decided to do so, and it ended up making Elvis, first of all, immortal, but second of all, just Graceland in general became such an empire. Over 600,000 people a year visit Graceland, so it has been just a absolute booming business ever since.
I'm happy to announce, as you know, that Graceland will be open to the public as a memorial museum to Elvis Presley.
It's been my home for a long time, and it had to go beyond that, and I guess reality and economics is a major point. So it has to go beyond emotions.
Is the upkeep on Graceland terribly draining on the estate?
Very much so. Absolutely. This has been a major point. And this has been, of course, the major decision of why we are opening it.
Did you talk in jest about someday Graceland opening to the public? Yes, absolutely. Elvis was very proud of his home, and anytime guests would come in, he was more than willing to show them throughout the house. And I think he'd be very pleased to know that it was shown in this way.
I think Priscilla Presley is a super cool lady who really did a lot to make sure Elvis's name, you know, was remembered. That's what she claims Elvis definitely would have wanted. I don't even know if Elvis would have the same status that he did without the help of Priscilla Presley. Like, of course, you know, Elvis was talented. Of course he was a singer. Of course he was a performer. Duh. But the way that Priscilla really carried on his name, I feel like is what sealed him into being a legacy. Pretty cool to watch. That is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this, and if there's any other celebrities that you want me to cover their lives and talk about, I would love to know. I'm probably gonna do a video on Anna Nicole Smith and Pamela Anderson are the people that I'm thinking of right now, but if you have anyone that you want me to do a video on, I want to do another one on Amy Winehouse because it's been a long time since I've done one on her. So let me know if that's something that you guys would want. That is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every week, and I will see you guys later. Bye.